So we're trying to find out a little bit more about trusts now in this section, trust and beneficial ownership, you know. Who benefits, cui bono? The trustee, John Selman continues here, is destitute of any right of beneficial enjoyment of the trust property. His ownership, therefore, is a matter of form rather than of substance, and nominal rather than real. You know, we have a private venue. That's the flesh and blood man, the sovereign on the land. Then we've got this commercial venue where we just become part of this overall legal fiction, the lex mercatori, the law merchant, admiralty law, and all of that rot, the juris civilis, the Roman civil law. If we have regard to the essence of the matter rather than to the form of it, a trustee is not an owner at all, but a mere agent. Now we're bringing in agency, upon whom the law has conferred the power and imposed the duty of administering the property of another. In legal theory, however, he is not a mere agent, but an owner. He is a person to whom the property of someone else is fictitiously attributed by the law, to the extent that the rights and powers thus vested in a nominal owner shall be used by him on behalf of the real owner. As between trustees and beneficiaries, the law recognizes the truth of the matter. As between these two, the property belongs to the latter and not to the former. But as between the trustee and third persons, the fiction prevails. The trustee is clothed with the rights of his beneficiary and is so enabled to personate or represent him in dealings with the world at large. In rem. John Selman. Interesting stuff. Voting pools and trust agreements, this out of Dillevue and Howard, the principles of business law. Various devices have been used whereby minority interests or a group of stockholders may effectively control a corporation. We talked about corporation nation. I brought it to your attention before that these minority groups, these holding companies, can actually own, control these corporations, even though to the casual observer it wouldn't appear that they had a majority. Well, here's how the device works. Even in the corporation nation, right? Pools and trust agreements, various devices have been used whereby minority interests or a group of stockholders may effectively control a corporation. The creation of a holding company, the issuance of non-voting shares, or the issuance of shares with voting rights but with a small or nominal par value. Voting pools and voting trusts have all been utilized for this purpose. We talked earlier in the broadcast, I brought that one article out, the creative mobilier of the green energy. You go back and look at Corporation Nation, you see all of the corporations that CalPERS is owning huge stock shares in. IBM, General Electric, Microsoft, Apple, Vestas, and on and on and on the list goes. You want to know who's running the house here? Why do we continue to advance global man-made, anthropomorphic, anthropogenic climate change? Because it's in the school's best interest, academia's best interest to do so. They're the ones that write up this crooked science. They're the ones that promote it to the children, to the young people, into their minds. They're the ones that get the benefit out of it. And they're the ones that are sitting on the floor in Wisconsin at the Capitol building. If they're still hanging out there, maybe they ran out of pizzas and beer, have to call Barry the Usurper up again and get Organized America to make another truckload delivery. A voting pool arises whenever a number of stockholders agree to vote their stocks as a unit in accordance with a certain plan. What's the real problem here? Well, it's the National Education Association. It goes full spectrum, from Florida to Washington State, from Jackman, Maine, all the way down to San Diego, California, and everything in between. And it's just one. That's just one group. That's just the teachers. Then there's all the rest. All of these pension funds and so on and so forth. We found out yesterday that Goldman Sachs is no longer the leader. selling the stocks to these various institutions. Now J.P. Morgan, the and New York Stock Exchange, Euronext, the Deutsche Börse AG, connecting up with Japan, is now the leader in that. A voting trust develops from the transfer of title of their shares by various stockholders to a trustee for the purpose of voting the stock. Who votes the stock? The stock is then registered in his name. He votes at the meetings of shareholders and receives dividends as they're declared. He issues to each stockholder whose stock he holds a certificate of beneficial interest. He also might say that he collects a commission on the going in and the coming out, which entitles the owner thereof to have his shares returned at the termination of the trust and to receive dividends within a given time after they're paid. In the early law, some courts held voting trusts unenforceable because they tend to separate ownership from the control and management. Today, courts enforce the trust agreement unless its objectives are improper or the period of its continuance unreasonably long, and then the Model Business Corporation Act sets a limit of 10 years upon voting trusts. We just went through this Uniform Law Commission. And that's where you get all these model codes and model acts, right? Let's take something a little bit more mundane, but certainly worthy of reading. I have this huge book here in front of me, the Family Legal Guide. It was compiled by, at least compiled or published by Reader's Digest of all things. It's a complete encyclopedia of law for the layman. Why are you spending $500, $600 an hour on some Joe Doke in a fancy office with a nice suit? We're deficient. We're slated for a lack of knowledge here. Law is complex, but you got to get into the language, remember? These are objects floating around in space. Henry Bergson. Concepts, in fact, are outside of each other like objects in space, and they have the same stability as such objects on which they've been modeled. Logical positivism. Trust. What is a trust? This, again, this legal dictionary or huge guide published by the Reader's Digest. Let's see if I can get a date on it. Here we go. Yep. 1981, copyright. The Reader's Digest Association, we appreciate them for the book. I'm reading from the hardbound edition right now, page 1006. Trust. I'm coming back to these basic definitions of trust over and over again, just bringing in the language, helping us to see what we're talking about here before we go deeper and deeper into it. A relationship in which someone holds property for the benefit of another. The person who creates the trust is the settlor. And that's what the Israelis are doing in Palestine. They're settling Palestinians' land and then keeping them out, by the way. We're paying for it. The person who holds the property for another's benefit is the trustee. We have a settler. We have the trustee. The person who benefits from the trust is the beneficiary. And the property that makes up the trust is the trust property. Now, think how handy it would be for the state, I should say for this state, or this county, or this federal union, to turn the card around and become the beneficiary and make you the trustee, so that you have all of the duties, the rights, the penalties, the pains, the taxes, the penalties, and exactions under your civil rights, and they get all the benefits. Wouldn't that be clever? You don't think they've tried it? Might not be the way it is in this world. We'll find out a little bit about Rose and her mother in a moment. Stay tuned.